So how do you set prices?
Whoa, your aim is terrible.
Hi, we're Blair and Jen Costs, and welcome to this episode of Will They Make It?
Yes, will they make it? So,
in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how do you set prices?
yes, the whole thing of getting enough margin, making enough money to actually have great service, carry great products, to actually pay the rent, pay the bills,
feed ourselves.
Yes, that novel concept of feeding ourselves. And disclaimer: we are still struggling with this ourselves. So if you're in the similar boat of just scratching your head with how do I set prices effectively, this is what we're going to talk about and share with you as well.
Well, one thing when it comes to pricing, and we've mentioned this in another episode before, is the fact of starting to do smaller markets where you can actually test what your thresholds are for pricing. And that's actually a really important concept. It's fundamental to starting a business and marketing, is you actually need to find out, are you setting prices too low? Because believe it or not, you can actually set prices too low.
Oh yes, we made that mistake because we were just like, whoa, is little us here at the market, and so we were pricing.
Nobody will buy from us.
Well, we set our product that a lot of people know, the Idea Box. I think we started at what, $35?
$35.
We couldn't sell any of them.
Not one.
The cameras, like our famous Argus C3 brick camera, we were selling for like $55 and $65. I think at the
Couldn't sell one.
We never sold one. So now they sell for like $185, and they sell all day long for the camera.
Yeah,
But so like I said, we definitely priced too low, and then that whole what is the floor and what is the ceiling also varies on context of where it's at too.
It is, and what's really important to remember is you kind of think price, but if you set something too low, and this is true like if you're going and negotiating for a job, if you set the price too low, you're actually diminishing the work and the product, and so people then look at it and go, oh, well, if it's only X amount, then it's not that good.
Yeah.
But then you can actually set prices too high, where then people are, and you can feel it yourself when you're buying something. If you don't think the value is there for that high price, then you're like, yeah, they're just gouging me, and that's just crazy, and I feel taken advantage of.
And again, we were pretty gutsy with testing this, too low and too high, and just incremental in between. And we also paid attention to the setting of the market. Like, it was one thing to ask X dollars in an outdoor market with our boat, faux leather table drops and stuff, and
Early on.
we got to, like that double that price we started with, and things were selling well. When we doubled or tripled from that low price, it was too high, and the sales did stop. Then when we got into indoor markets, with a really nice setting and the bookshelves and the birch plywood and all that, then we were able to raise prices even higher.
Well, that's true, and besides, we got better at talking about the value and the stories behind it. So that is important as a fact. People will pay more if they know the value of what they're paying, or if there's that emotional connection and the quality, and that's up to you to convey through the look, the feel, the way you're displaying it, the quality of that product. The other thing Blair mentioned, though, is the context. And so, that's where people are like, well, why did you come here to Ross Park Mall and open up a store? Well, really, it is an important context. We did the art show circuit for so long, but there is still so much you can do from a pricing, from an art show perspective, because the context of an outdoor market or even an art market is going to set a certain amount of pricing, versus actually having a flagship store that gives that perceived value to somebody for that pricing, if you're going to have a long-term business.
Yeah, and so like I say, you've got a gallery setting now that's enabled us to put prices even higher, and I think the product quality has increased as well.
Absolutely.
With more careful buying, we know if we're going to get that price, we can pay a little bit more for a better starting product. The other thing that I think is really important, and that I think we still are working on, is explaining in person, verbally, why the product is valuable, why it's important, why it's worth that money.
I would agree, and it's a real essence of selling here that you learn from doing. All good salespeople out there, if you're watching, will appreciate this. Part of it is conveying the value, but you can't overtalk the sale either, and you can't over-explain to a customer. You've got to find that right balance of knowing where you need to explain.
And it varies based on the customer too. Some are very interested and want to know that, and others just love the aesthetic, and that's all they care about.
And fair enough. And I'm sometimes that way in a store myself.
So that covers kind of how we felt around in the dark ourselves to test pricing, because we really I mean, we made some assumptions, but we were very good about testing those
Yes.
assumptions and seeing where things would fall, as far as pricing
And
goes.
Blair, with that testing, then it goes to the next thing here. So why is that pricing so important? Because it gets into the big...
Yeah. So, like I say, pricing is, we were pretty pure on just testing pricing without regards to other factors. But then we also, as we started thinking about, building the business and stuff, then the other factors, principally being the direct cost of the products, became very important. Yeah, so margins are critical. And, this means that all the costs that are directly related to that, so this isn't, trying to spread rent cost onto the product or other indirect, marketing costs, but this is, I've got X for the camera body, I've got Y for the cord kit and stuff. I got another, cost for the light bulb, and my total, labor. Yep, counting labor properly is really critical.
And that's labor for building the product, not labor for running the store and everything like that. That's labor for product.
Yeah, and that, that's the two direct, indirect costs are really critical to understand. But once you understand and fully account for the direct cost of the product, now you need to think about margins, and we like to think of it in terms of what they call cost times margins. And a lot of, I think a lot of people that get into just doing retail, they buy stuff and then they just think in terms of doubling the cost to come up with the retail price. To then say,
very hard to keep a long, successful business going with something like that.
Yeah, that's a terrible business model because there is so much indirect costs that need to be covered. And so, in a retail environment, and again, this varies with each business, but you really should be thinking in terms of doing 5 to 8 times cost margin. So if you've got $1 into the product, you should be able to sell it for $5, $6, $7, $8 of that at a retail price.
And some businesses like jewelry, cosmetics, they're like 20 times product cost.
A lot of big brand apparel is 20 times cost. So that's, they have 5 cents. They have 5 cents in each dollar they sell. I mean, it's.
And that's, so then what does that do? Those margins is actually what gives you cushion, and that cushion is to cover the indirect costs. And so that is your rent, your accounting, your salespeople. Salespeople are indirect costs. Anybody who's working that doesn't directly build your product is considered indirect.
Yeah.
And it's also your marketing dollars. So you may go, wow, those cosmetic brands 20 times. But like every single ad that's in one of those big glossy magazines.
Costs a fortune.
The Victoria's Secret fashion show that they throw on and stuff costs a fortune.
And I think that's also from a small business perspective, you do need to have those kind of 5, 8, 10 times margins so you can do marketing. Because it is, people, I think we've said this before, people need to be told that you're cool. And you need to drive that yourself.
It's true. And you're going to have to pay for accounting costs and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to have insurances and everything like that. That is just what those margins. And you're going to have whoopsies. You're going to have returns. And that's the cushion to help give you that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's times where I open a box of cameras or a projector and it's broken in half. And I mean, there's just no way I'm going to reclaim that.
And every business has that. You're not going to have 100% of everything coming through.
That's an indirect cost called loss, which can either be those kind of scenarios or it can actually be theft.
Yeah.
And that's a real cost, and you can think that you're not going to face that, but you will face that. Trust me.
So in understanding these margins, what is some things that people can do, because it can be difficult to get your hands wrapped around that margin aspect. So one thing I know we do is we started out a piece of paper, but we got into a spreadsheet very quickly. Yeah,
spreadsheets really should be your best friend as a business person. And if you're not comfortable with the spreadsheets, then a ledger paper or just a piece of paper with just columns of costs. But you need to understand all those costs and what are contained there.
And you need to be honest with yourself and realistic. Like, do not just say, oh, no, this isn't part of it. And so, like, it also, if you're doing something where, like, the price fluctuates a little bit, then you need to take the average price of it. But you do need to take all of that into it. But you do yourself a disservice if you don't include everything that goes in that product, because you're not going to be successful if you don't.
And I'll bet that what's in their heads is like, I'll never get 5 times more. Like having $1 and sell it for $5, that'll never happen for me. And I mean, I have to say, when we were working on different business concepts, including this one, is like the idea of getting 5 to 8 times margin was really a far distant goal. I mean, I really didn't see it myself how we were going to get there.
It takes time.
It takes a lot of time. And, in our next episode, we're going to talk about the different levers you can work with to actually achieve those margins. And we'll share directly some of the things that we did to achieve that kind of margins in our business.
Yep, absolutely.
So stay tuned on that.
Stay tuned on that. And so now it's time for your questions. And Blair, if somebody has questions before we answer this week's episode,
Sure.
Where can they submit them?
Sure. Go to our website, willtheymakeit.com, and look for the appropriate button to ask your questions. And we're going to look for you to either provide a short video or a short audio memo that asks a question so that we get to actually hear directly from you.
Yeah, cool. And now this week's question.
Yep.
Hey Blair and Jen, thanks so much for creating this channel and teaching us how to start a business and doing it well.
Yeah.
Our question is this. It sounds like everybody goes through a time when it's really tough and really challenging. How do you keep that optimism or that hope that there's actually light at the end of the tunnel and that you can actually make it? So that's the first question.
Yeah, and the second question is, when do you know when to pivot? Whether you're pivoting your product or your messaging, how do you know when to stick with something and when you should change it up?
Those are our questions. We love any insights you have. Thanks.
You so much.
Bye.
See ya.
You guys are killing us. I mean, this is brutal. This has just been a heck of a 2 weeks. And you guys throw this question to us. We are way off sales targets. We have inventory problems. I mean, we really hit the wall this week. And we actually just filmed a full episode on what to do when things are really going awry. So that'll be upcoming. But yeah, quite an interesting thing. So the first thing I'd say, Duke, is to really keep perspective on the bigger picture. That it's not all about the problem of today or the missing sales today. It's about the business plan. We have a number of really cool things that are going to come up in Q1 of next year, 2020, and we need to be prepared and working on that. And we also just need to remember that every entrepreneur goes through this kind of stuff.
Every entrepreneur has setbacks. Yeah. Everybody does. And it's up to you not to sulk and complain. I mean, you're scared.
As much as I want to.
Yeah, you're scared and you have those emotions and things. But it's up to you to change the trajectory. And that is what every successful entrepreneur will tell you. Is there's actually incremental baby steps that you can do along the way to change the trajectory.
And what did we do?
We went home and we busted our butt and we did a lot of things to change trajectory. At the end of the day, you own this.
Yeah, it was a long Sunday night.
It was
a long Sunday night.
But the also thing is when you do those setbacks, then actually the customers you feel positive, you've done something, and actually the customers and those that you're working to serve will sense that you've done something and you'll relax a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's a twofold thing, and a lot of this comes down to emotion and people's perspectives.
Yeah.
But that's an awesome question, and we appreciate you asking it, Duke.
Yep, thanks.
You'll never know for sure. Great question, Melissa. I mean, and you have to live with that reality, and we're facing that question ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
If this was easy and if it was a straight plan, everybody would do it, and it's not. So at the end of the day, you don't 100% know for sure. It's not 100% guarantee.
Yeah. Another thing is to have a plan that you can measure against and benchmark against for yourself, and that way, I think that's really critical. And that way, you have something other than just emotion and fear to base decision making on. Having a way to measure real numbers to say, I expect this to happen. And this happened, which is radically different, or maybe it's not so far apart.
The numbers in the plan are critical because it actually, as Blair said, it gives you real information to work with. And actually, all the big brands and all the big companies do this because then it also allows you to judge, if I did this change, what were the results, good or bad? And then it allows you to be purposeful with the changes you make in moving the ball.
Now, one thing I bet Melissa's thinking and Duke's thinking is, how am I ever going to get a plan right? I don't know what I'm doing yet. And the answer is, you don't have to have it be right. You just have to have something that says, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Yeah. This is what's really happening. Then you tweak and you think and you twink and you experience. And so it's better to have something that's like not necessarily perfectly valid, but it's better to have something to work with than nothing.
Absolutely. You have to start somewhere. And that's how you start off the blank page. And what that also does, Blair mentioned a little bit, is it gets it down and it separates it out from fear and unfounded worry. Fear and unfounded worry are the worst things you're going to have to deal with because it makes you irrational and it can make a mountain out of a molehill that doesn't really exist.
Yep.
So get down to brass tacks, tactical of what you need to get
Yep.
done.
You know, and one thing that we're facing is that, is it a full pivot? Or is it just kind of an adjustment, major tweaking kind of stuff? And one thing that I notice is that when you listen to podcasts, especially when it's on more of that technical startup side, they love to tell the stories of, oh, I started selling widgets and then we turned into a security services firm.
Yes.
Or, you know, I mean, just these radically crazy different things that this company became. That's, typically for a small business startup, folks, you're probably not going to, totally change your business model on the fly. It's more about really changing the perspective, making the adjustments. And certainly something we're looking at is how do we go from these small gift things to much bigger interior design stuff.
Well, and so part of this too is having your plan, but pay attention to really what's working and what's not, and what has the energy and what doesn't. And all those companies, when they radically shifted from one thing to another, it's because they found there was heat and energy here, and they went in that direction. And then they did it again, heat and energy here, and that's where they went. And that's how you pivot. Look where the energy is.
Yep.
Hey, thanks, Melissa. Great question.
Yep, thanks.
So that's it for this episode of Will They Make It?
Yep, we'd like to thank our producer, Claire Costello.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye
everybody.